All right, so you're struggling with this whole TCPA compliance thing.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a minefield out there, and it feels like any little misstep could
Uh,
land you in trouble. But
yeah.
don't worry, we've got you covered.
Yeah, we're here to help.
We've been poring over the latest rulings and expert advice,
Yeah.
and we're going to give you a clear roadmap to navigate this tricky terrain.
It's really interesting how these regulations are changing to put consumers more in control.
Right.
But, they're still trying to balance that with the needs of legitimate businesses.
Yeah.
So we're going to break down exactly how to get consent correctly in this new one-to-one world.
Okay, so let's start with deadlines.
Yeah.
We keep hearing about January 26, 2025. What happens then?
That's it. That's the deadline.
Okay.
That's when the music stops for all those leads you collected under the old rules.
Oh, wow.
If you haven't gotten that explicit one-to-one consent by then, you can't use any automated technology to reach out to those leads.
So even if I got a leads info, totally legit a year ago,
Yeah.
it's useless after January 26, 2025, unless I've got
Unless you have that specific consent.
that specific consent.
You got it.
Wow, okay.
That's why it's so crucial to start implementing those compliance strategies now.
Right.
No more procrastinating.
No more kicking the can down the road.
Exactly.
This feels like such a massive shift. What exactly was wrong with the old way of doing things?
Well, for years, companies relied on those broad consent forms.
Okay.
You know the ones you get from lead generators?
Right.
Where you click a tiny little hyperlink?
Oh, yeah.
And it takes you to this page with a list of like 1,000 companies you've supposedly agreed to hear from.
Oh, yeah, I've seen those.
The FCC is cracking down on this.
Yeah.
They're saying no more hiding in the fine print.
So it's all about transparency
Yeah.
and making sure the consumer's really in control.
Absolutely. The consumer has to actively choose who they want to hear from.
Okay.
And it needs to be super clear what they're consenting to.
All right, so how do we actually get this one-to-one consent?
Right?
There's so many moving parts.
There are, but let's break it down channel by channel. Let's
Okay.
start with forms.
Okay.
Those are usually the first point of contact.
Makes sense.
The key here is to make those forms squeaky clean.
So what does squeaky clean even mean in this new TCPA world?
Well, there's this leading TCPA expert, Eric Troutman.
Okay.
He put together a checklist.
Oh,
He calls it the Troutman Min 15.
the Troutman Min 15.
Yes. It outlines 15 essential elements for compliant consent forms.
15 elements. It sounds intense.
It is comprehensive, but it's all about making sure the consumer is informed and in control.
Okay.
For example, your form has to clearly state that consent isn't required to buy anything.
Okay.
It needs to detail exactly what types of communication they're consenting to, SMS,
Yeah.
AI-generated voice messages, pre-recorded calls, all of that.
Gotcha.
And super important, it needs to let them pick and choose which providers they want to hear from. No more blanket select all.
So no more pre-checked boxes or burying it in the terms and conditions.
Exactly. Clarity is key.
Okay.
The consumer needs to know what they're signing up for.
Right.
And they have to make an active choice to opt in.
That makes sense. So where can people find this Troutman Min 15 checklist?
Troutman's firm was nice enough to put a free template form on their website.
So?
TCPAworld.com.
TCPAworld.com.
Yeah, it's a great place to start if you want to revamp your forms and make sure they're compliant.
That's super helpful. Now, what about consent via SMS?
Yeah.
Text messaging is so popular these days,
Oh, it is.
but it seems tricky.
Yeah, SMS is a little trickier because it's so immediate,
Right?
You can't just use a text message to capture consent for ongoing marketing.
So how can businesses use SMS then to get that consent?
Think of SMS as a bridge to your compliant forms.
Okay.
You can use a text message to invite people to your website to opt in through a properly designed form.
So the text is like a little invitation.
Exactly, a friendly invitation.
Okay. But even the text itself needs to be clear.
Okay.
It should clearly state that they're being invited to opt in.
Okay.
Include the company name, explain what they'll be getting,
Gotcha.
like marketing messages or special offers, and then have a clear call to action to visit the website and provide their consent.
Keep it short and sweet.
Exactly. No funny business.
Okay, what about email? How does that fit into all of this?
Oh, email's interesting.
Okay.
It's subject to the CAN-SPAM Act,
Right.
but the TCPA requirements are a bit more relaxed.
Okay.
You can use email campaigns to teach your contacts about these upcoming changes
Okay.
and encourage them to update their communication preferences.
So email is more of an educational tool to get them to your compliant website.
Exactly. You want to explain the shift toward one-to-one consent and why it's important.
Okay.
And make it clear that after January 26, 2025, You can't reach out using automated technology unless they've given that specific consent.
I like that framing it as a way to stay connected
Yeah.
rather than just a legal hurdle. Exactly. And of course, make sure that email has a big link to your website
Right.
where they can find that nice, clean form to update their preferences.
Okay, so we've covered forms,
Yep.
SMS,
Yeah.
email.
Huh.
What about getting consent over the phone during a live call?
That's where documentation's your best friend.
Okay.
You can get consent verbally, but you need to record the conversation and make sure you're getting all the important details.
So just getting a yes isn't enough?
No, you need proof.
Okay.
The recording needs to capture exactly what you said.
Right.
The date and time and the customer clearly agreeing to receive future calls for that specific purpose.
This is a lot to handle.
Yeah.
Are there any companies out there that are making this easier for businesses?
There are, absolutely.
Okay.
Several companies are focusing on helping businesses stay compliant.
Okay.
One that's doing some interesting things is channel automation.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of them. What are they doing specifically to keep their clients on the right side of the TCPA?
They're really into consent management.
Well, from the ground up.
Okay.
So they're working directly with lead aggregators to verify that every lead has actually opted in.
So they're making sure the leads are legit.
Yeah. They're not just collecting a name and number anymore.
Impressive.
Right. And they're not messing around with vague opt-in agreements either.
Okay.
They're looking at the details, the exact opt-in language, the timestamp, even what product the customer was interested in.
Wow, that's serious attention to detail.
It is. They're also big on secure data storage.
Okay, good.
Although they only store this info for 2 weeks.
Oh.
Which makes you wonder if that's enough given the TCPA's 4-year statute of limitations.
2 weeks versus 4 years.
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
Yeah, we should definitely come back to that.
You should.
What else is channel automation doing?
Well, they're very careful about creating accurate contact records.
Okay.
You know, it's more than just the name and number.
Yeah. They make sure they have all the TCPA required info, including the specific consent details and the person's communication preferences.
So no more scrambling for records if someone questions your compliance.
Exactly. And they've also got these message compliance filters to stop clients from accidentally sending messages to people who haven't opted in.
So it's like a safety net.
They're using the stored consent data to double-check everything before a message goes out.
That takes a lot of pressure off knowing someone is looking out for you.
It does. What about managing opt-outs?
Yeah, how do they handle that?
Channel automation seems to have that covered, too.
Okay, good.
Their platform handles opt-out requests really quickly.
Okay.
They use keywords like S.P to automatically remove people from messaging sequences.
Got it.
And they add them to a blacklist so they won't be contacted again.
So no more accidental messages to someone who said they're not interested.
Exactly. And they keep a detailed record of all the blacklisted numbers so clients can update their systems.
That's great. So it sounds like channel automation is really trying to make this TCPA thing as painless as possible for businesses.
They are, but even with tools like this, companies still need to be proactive.
Right. TCPA compliance is an ongoing thing.
It is. It's not a one-time fix.
So let's talk about the shelf life of leads.
Yeah.
We know January 26, 2025 is a hard deadline.
It is.
But does that mean even leads acquired today have an expiration date?
I hate to say it, but yes.
Oh, wow.
Even leads you get today using compliant methods.
Right.
They'll expire on that date unless they meet the 1-to-1 rule.
So no grace period.
No.
Even for brand new leads.
It's a big change.
That's tough.
It forces companies to rethink their whole approach to leads.
Yeah. Okay, so the clock is ticking.
It is.
And we need to get things in order.
Absolutely.
But let's say a business has done everything right. Their forms are perfect.
Yeah.
They're managing consent meticulously.
Uh-huh.
And they're using a platform like channel automation.
Okay.
But they still have older leads they haven't reached yet.
Right.
What are their options after the deadline?
Well, manually dialing numbers not on the do not call list is still allowed.
So picking up the phone old school style.
Yeah. It's not the most efficient, but it can be a last resort.
Okay. So it's still on the table.
It is. But there are some things to watch out for.
Like what?
Well, first, it's obviously not as scalable as automated outreach.
All right.
And second, you have to be super careful about reassigned numbers.
Reassign numbers. What's the issue there?
Imagine you have a lead from a few years ago.
Okay.
That phone number could easily be reassigned to someone else now.
Uh-huh.
If you call that number, even if you had consent from the original owner,
Right.
you could be breaking the TCPA.
Wow. I hadn't even thought about that. And it's not like people announce their new number.
Right.
So what can businesses do to protect themselves from accidentally calling reassigned numbers.
Luckily, the FCC has a tool for that.
Oh,
It's called the Reassigned Numbers Database, or RND.
okay.
You can scrub your contact list against this database to see if any numbers have been reassigned.
So it's worth the cost.
It's a small price to pay for peace of mind
Right.
and to avoid those hefty TCPA fines.
Okay, so manual dialing is an option.
Yeah.
But not a perfect solution.
Nope.
Are there any other deadlines businesses need to know about?
Oh, yeah, there's a big one coming up fast.
Okay.
December 1st, 2024.
What's that one?
That's the deadline to register business texting numbers with the campaign registry.
Wait, businesses need to register to send texts now.
They do.
What's that all about?
It's part of a larger effort to fight spam and fraud,
Okay.
but it's made things more complicated for businesses.
Yeah, I bet.
If they don't register by that deadline, they might get blocked from sending texts completely.
Wow. So what should businesses know about this registration?
Honestly, it's a little frustrating.
How so?
Well, the campaign registry, the group in charge of this whole thing,
Right.
is actually a foreign company. It's a little strange to have to register your free speech with a foreign entity, but that's how it is for now.
It really shows how complicated regulations have become.
It does, but
Right.
even with all these deadlines and requirements, there's still so much uncertainty around the TCPA.
Especially with that Supreme Court decision, Loper Bright Enterprises v. Raimondo.
Yeah, that one's a real curveball.
Loper Bright Enterprises v. Raimondo.
Yeah.
That's a mouthful. Can you break that down for us?
Essentially, the Supreme Court overturned what's known as Chevron deference.
Okay.
This means courts no longer have to automatically accept a federal agency's interpretation of a law if the law is ambiguous.
So it's like the Supreme Court is saying, hey, FCC, we're not just going to take your word for it anymore.
Exactly. We're going to scrutinize your interpretations a bit more.
So what does that mean for the TCPA?
It has major implications.
Okay.
There's actually a case pending in the 11th Circuit.
Okay.
Insurance Marketing Coalition, Limited v. FCC. That's directly challenging the FCC's power to enforce this whole one-to-one rule.
So the FCC is facing a legal challenge to its own authority.
They are.
Wow. What does that mean for businesses trying to comply with the TCPA?
It creates a ton of uncertainty.
Okay.
The outcome of that insurance marketing case could totally change how the TCPA is interpreted and enforced moving forward.
So we're in kind of a legal limbo.
We are. It's a time of transition for sure.
Right.
And the best practices for TCPA compliance will likely change as these court rulings and interpretations of Loper Bright come out.
So what does all this mean for our listeners?
Right.
The TCPA landscape seems to be getting more and more complex every day.
It is.
What can businesses do to make sure their outreach is both compliant and effective in the long run?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
You know, from the one-to-one consent rule to companies like Channel Automation who are helping businesses adapt.
Right.
But it's clear that we're in uncharted territory here. And it's more important than ever for businesses to stay informed and be proactive.
I completely agree. This has been a deep dive in the truest sense of the word.
It has.
But I think everyone listening now has some valuable information to navigate this new world of TCPA compliance.
I hope so.
Ready to tackle part 2 of this puzzle?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
Great. So this raises an important question for everyone out there listening. What can you do today to make sure your outreach is compliant and effective?
Yeah.
You know, especially because the rules seem to be changing all the time.
That's a great point. It's not just about understanding these changes. Businesses actually need to take action.
Yeah.
So let's break it down. What are some practical first steps to get ahead of this whole TCPA thing?
Well, the first thing I would say is to take a look at your current processes for lead generation and management. You know, do a real audit and ask yourself some tough questions.
Okay.
Like, do your forms actually meet those Trout Minimum 15 criteria we talked about? Are you properly documenting consent, especially for those verbal agreements over the phone?
Okay.
And are you scrubbing your lists against the do not call and reassign numbers databases?
Right.
It's time to really figure out what needs to be fixed.
So it's like spring cleaning for your communication practices.
Yeah.
You need to know what you're working with before you can start making things better.
Exactly. And once you have a clear understanding of where you stand, you can start making a plan to get everything in tip-top shape.
Okay.
Maybe that means updating your website forms or revising your lead capture process.
Right.
Or maybe it means investing in a platform like Channel Automation to streamline all your efforts.
So it's like treating TCPA compliance as a project with goals and deadlines.
That's a great way to think about it. And remember, this isn't just about avoiding legal trouble.
Yeah.
It's about building trust with your audience.
Right.
When people feel like you respect their privacy and their choices, they're way more likely to actually engage with your business.
That makes sense. It's about moving away from that old spray and pray approach to marketing where you just blast your message to everyone.
Exactly.
And hope something sticks. Instead, it's about being more targeted and building genuine relationships with people who actually want to hear from you.
Exactly. And in the long run, that approach is going to be much more effective for businesses anyway.
So audit your processes.
Yeah.
Develop a compliance plan.
Mm-hmm.
And focus on building trust. What else can businesses do to stay ahead of the curve?
Never stop learning. The TCPA landscape changes constantly. So stay informed about new rulings and interpretations. You can subscribe to industry newsletters.
Okay.
Follow legal blogs like TCPA World.
Right.
Even attend webinars or conferences to keep yourself up to date.
So it's like continuing education for TCPA compliance. You got to keep learning if you want to stay ahead.
You got it. And don't be afraid to ask the experts for help.
Okay.
If you're ever unsure about something, talk to a lawyer who knows TCPA compliance inside and out. They can guide you through all the legal complexities and make sure your business is doing things by the book. Think of them as your TCPA Sherpa.
I love that, a TCPA Sherpa guiding you through the mountains of legal stuff.
Exactly. They can help you avoid costly mistakes and make sure you're on the right path.
Okay, so we've got audit your processes, develop a compliance plan,
Yep.
stay informed,
Yep.
and seek expert advice if needed. That's a great roadmap. But what about all the uncertainty surrounding Loper Bright? How should businesses approach TCPA compliance when the FCC's power is being challenged?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Loper Bright has definitely thrown us a curveball. The best advice I can give is to play it safe.
Okay.
Assume the strictest interpretation of the TCPA is going to win out.
Okay.
Get that explicit consent.
Right.
Document everything meticulously and don't try to cut corners.
So be prepared for the worst.
Exactly. It might seem like overkill now, but it'll protect you in the long run. Think of it like building a house with extra strong supports just in case there's an earthquake.
That's a great analogy. It might seem like too much, but it's better to be safe than sorry.
Exactly. And while we wait for the courts to figure out what Loper Bright really means, the best thing to do is be proactive, diligent, and maybe a little bit prudent.
Prudent. I like that. Maybe a little less dramatic than paranoid, but it still gets that sense of watchfulness across.
Exactly. The key is that businesses can't afford to ignore TCPA compliance.
It's time to face the music, make the necessary changes, and make sure you're operating ethically, legally, and in a way that respects your audience.
Couldn't have said it better myself. You know, by embracing a more consumer-centric approach to communication, businesses can avoid legal headaches and actually build stronger relationships with their customers.
And isn't that what it's all about in the end? Building those authentic connections and creating a win-win for everyone.
Absolutely.
All right. I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today. What's your final thought for them to ponder as they try to make sense of this whole TCPA world?
That's a good one. Let me see. I think the most important thing to remember is that technology is always changing, and so are the laws that govern it.
Okay.
What might be considered best practice today could be outdated tomorrow. You know, it's a constant process of adapting and learning.
So stay curious, stay informed, and stay flexible.
Exactly. The most successful businesses will be the ones who embrace this evolution and see compliance not as a burden, but as an opportunity to build trust and deepen those customer relationships.
I love that perspective. It's about seeing compliance as a way to create a more ethical and sustainable business.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a really powerful way to think about it. It's not just about following rules and avoiding fines.
Right.
It's about creating a more ethical and transparent way of doing business.
Absolutely. And I think that shift in mindset is actually good for everyone involved. For businesses, it builds trust and loyalty. And for consumers, it creates a more respectful and, empowering experience.
Yeah, imagine a world where our inboxes and our phones aren't constantly blowing up with unwanted messages.
Right.
Where the messages we do get are actually relevant.
Yeah.
And, things we want.
That would be amazing, wouldn't it? And I think it's possible, with the right tools and strategies and mindset, we can create a communication system that's good for everyone.
Yeah, and that's what we've been trying to do with this whole deep dive.
Absolutely.
To give our listeners the knowledge and the tools to navigate this crazy landscape and create a better way forward.
Well said.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of TCPA compliance, what's the one thing you want everyone listening to take away from all of this?
Let me think. I think the most important thing to remember is to approach TCPA compliance as an opportunity, not a burden.
Okay.
It's a chance to build trust, strengthen relationships, and create a more ethical and sustainable business model.
That's a great point to end on. It's a reminder that we're not just talking about rules and regulations here.
Right.
We're talking about building a better future for communication.
Yeah.
One where respect, transparency, and genuine connection are the most important things.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, on that note, it's time for us to sign off. Thanks so much for joining us on this journey into the world of TCPA compliance.
It was my pleasure.
We hope you found it helpful and insightful, and remember, the journey doesn't end here. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged in shaping the future of communication. Until next time, keep diving deep.